Good afternoon, everybody. This is Patrick Almond with Stop Doing Nothing on Stop Doing Nothing podcast for high achievers. Episode number, I believe we're up to number 12 right now, and we're doing something a little bit different for this podcast. We are recording video at the same time that we're recording the podcast portion, so we have multiple devices running. And the reason I tell you that is if you're listening to the podcast and you want to actually watch me recording the podcast, you can go over to my YouTube channel and vice versa. If you're watching this video on YouTube right now, you can go over to StopDoingNothing.com and actually subscribe to the podcast via iTunes, via Stitcher, via SoundCloud. I've got it all those places. So we've got multiple things recording. This is just part of us kind of expanding the Stop Doing Nothing podcast, a show for high achievers. I've always been more of a video person than an audio person, but I'm also willing to satisfy my audience in any media they choose to consume. Like I said, I believe we're at episode 12 today. Hopefully you got to listen to last week's episode 11. This week is going to be starting off a little bit different. I've always wanted to do an episode on, emotional maturity and, just mental maturity. And this week something popped up in my Facebook feed which got me thinking about it very closely. And it was from a friend of mine named Jim Kukral. Last name Kukral. And his website is jimkukral.com, Kukral. I would suggest you go look him up. Very wise man, believe it or not. I've known him for a while online. I've only met him a couple times in person. As a matter of fact, I believe it's only been 2 times in person. And if you're watching this, Jim, I believe it was once at the Affiliate Marketing Conference many years ago. And then I ran into you at Infusion Con last year. And then we briefly had breakfast also. But Jim made a very brilliant post on his Facebook wall. And I thought I'd start off this week's podcast by reading what he wrote. So this is what he wrote. I copied and pasted it, and it's been sitting here in a notepad session on my desktop all week. This is from Jim Kukral. It is true, with age comes maturity, not just in physicality of the body, but in how we handle ourselves as human beings in dealing with situations and confrontations with others. Not 10 years ago, when confronted by a person that disagreed with me or attempted to enrage me, I would have done the following. A, immediately respond to that person via comments, text, phone, or in person with full veracity in order to defend my position. B, let that person and all of their negative energy and bile affect my current mood and happiness. Fortunately, I've learned my lesson. As most people learn through experience, the lesson that there are people in this world that are not happy for whatever reason they choose, and that those people, because of this choice, are not content letting other people choose the alternative. That's not to give the impression that I've achieved some Vulcan Zen-like mindset where I can't be moved to show emotion. I'm human just like the rest of us, but it's much harder for the a-hole on the freeway flipping me the bird to get me to react with anger. Rather, I'll just smile and wave and forget about them 10 seconds later, letting them rage on to their next victim. These soul-sucking zombies are trying to infect us all with their disease. They feed their misery by sneaking up behind us from a dark corner and dragging us down into their own pit of despair. We taste good. Love that line there, Jim. But fortunately, as you grow older, you discover the antidote, the miracle cure that cleanses your mind and body from the virus. And when you finally discover it, it changes your entire life from that moment on. Freedom to choose. And remember that phrase, that's very important. Freedom to choose. Freedom to choose to let the miserable people out of your life and not hate them, rather to pity them that they haven't figured it out just yet. You cannot convince a person to be happy the same way you can't convince someone to stop smoking or flossing their teeth more often. They're either going to choose, there's that word choice again, they're either going to choose to do it on their own volition or not. Your opinionated attempt to get them to cross over from the dark side is just that, your opinion. Choose your own happiness. And I love the way he just emphasizes the word choose and choice throughout his write-up. Choose your own happiness, and let those that haven't made the same choice find it on their own. In the meantime, steer clear of them and surround yourself with people that have swallowed the same pill you have. Or don't. The choice is yours. And again, this is not my works. This is completely the words and penmanship of Jim Kukral from jimkukral.com. And I wanted to start off the podcast talking about that a little bit and talking about emotional maturity. And as a result of things like what Jim wrote, and as a result of just learning that negative people and negative energy just get you nowhere in life. I have to admit, there were times in my past where I felt like Jim. I've been a very hateful, negative person in the past. There used to be that I would talk to people and I would get really frustrated. I would physically tense up. I don't know if you know me. I'm 6'2", maybe in the 250, 260 pound range, and I work out a lot with weights. And it's very easy for me to physically get tensed up to the point where I want to go all Hulk on something and smash something. And I've broken, I'll fully admit, I've broken my share of things in the world. I've slammed doors. I've broken glasses. I've broken drywall before just as a result of my anger. And it was all a choice on my part. There may have been external factors, but saying that someone made you mad is, to me, I'm not going to say it's immature, but it's you not taking responsibility for your actions and for your choices. And through counseling sessions, through just experience, through maturity on my own, I learned that there's a difference between a trigger in the world and how I react to that trigger. And those, separating those two things came about as a result of maturity. And that was one of the things that came about as a result of maturity. But as a result of that, what you also learn through maturity is what to pay attention to and what to ignore. And for example, I'll give you an example. One of the things I've realized that that really frustrates me, and I've learned through as maturity that, you know what, I cannot talk about these topics, is, you've heard about the idea of not talking about religion and politics on the internet. I can't even talk about those things in person. I'm a very logical person. I'm a very black and white person. I make a lot of decisions without any emotion involved. And lucky for me, my wife is the emotional side. She's the creative side, and she brings that to the relationship. But when you look at someone like me, who just gets into a discussion about politics or religion, and they have a very left brain mentality, I think is what I think it's called, it does not bode well. There's no such thing as a discussion with me over politics, a discussion with me over religion, because it just doesn't flow with my logical nature. And so over time, through maturity, I guess I should say, I've learned that I should not talk about those topics. And that's what I want you to take out of this podcast and of this video, if you're watching today, is that over time, hopefully you will realize that there are certain things that in your life don't bring you pleasure. There are certain people that you may hang around because you've been friends with them a long time, but you know what? Overall, they're just negative people, and they don't bring you any pleasure. You don't gain anything by being around them. They've been miserable in the past, they're miserable now, and they will always be miserable in the future. After a while, you have to choose to mature to another level to not hang around them. And this goes true in the real world and online also. There are times when I see things in my Facebook feed, when I pay attention to it, that really annoy me and piss me off. And I know some people that will look in their social media feeds and like, oh my goodness gracious, no way is that true, that's wrong, that person's an idiot. And I look at that and I keep thinking, well, why are you still connected to that person? If that person puts out constant conspiracy theories, for example, that have no basis on reality or no basis on fact, why in the world do you still choose to associate with that person? Get rid of that negative person, that negative energy out of your life. Mature to the level where you only surround yourself with people that, even though they may disagree with you, they do it in a positive form, and they can see that, that things are usually pretty good. There's no need to bring a negative energy to a conversation. So think about that with the people you surround yourself with, and hopefully, like I said, over time, you will realize there's just some things that you shouldn't be in your life, and it may even be that those things themselves are not negative, but the way your brain works and the way you interpret things may cause certain triggers in you, and you need to remove those from your life. They will get you frustrated. They will get you angry. They will tense you up. They will make you snap at your family. And that's something else I've noticed, is that I don't get into certain discussions with my family, my mom, my relatives, my wife, my daughter, because you know what? There is just no way that conversation's going to come out well. And it's just, I think over time it is just maturity that you learn that you just don't put yourself into certain conversations and certain things that are going to make you frustrated. They're not worth it. They poison you emotionally, they zap the energy out of you, and you can lose a lot of energy just fighting over particular topics and trying to prove yourself right. And after a while, it doesn't really matter. You learn through maturity, you know what? Everything is subject to interpretation. There is no such thing as right as wrong. But there are so many people that will fight to say that something is right or wrong, and they spend all that energy on there. And so again, that was the main gist of this podcast this week here at Stop Doing Nothing. And I even think I've felt myself getting tensed up talking about the topic. I'd like to hear your feedback on it. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel already, please go do that. It's at youtube.com/Patrick Allman. And of course, this is the Stop Doing Nothing podcast, and you can find this on iTunes and on Stitcher and on SoundCloud. So I'd like to hear, your opinion about this. I'm trying to get out a podcast every week. I run the website called StopDoingNothing.com, which I call where we build high achievers. And I'd like you to become a member on the email list there also. I can't really think of any other topics I want to cover this week, but again, if you haven't followed Jim Kukral, go to his website, jimkukral.com, or you can actually connect with him on Facebook if you want to and read this word for word. And like I said, I did not embellish it at all. That came word for word from his Facebook wall. I copied it out maybe about 4 or 5 days ago into a notepad session. You can't see my Mac screen over here, but it's been in a notepad session on my Mac screen there for a while. So again, get back to me. What do you think about emotional maturity? Are there ways over the years that you've matured, that you've learned, you know what, you don't get involved with certain things, or you've dropped certain friends, like lifelong friends? That's what I'd really be curious about to hear from you, is if you ever dropped a lifelong friend who after a while you just realized that, you know what, this relationship is not going anyplace. This relationship is poison. You mature. That's what I call it. That's what Jim calls it. You mature to a certain level where, you know what, no more. I'm done. It's been nice knowing you. Call me on the holidays. But outside of that, it's out of my life. So if you would, comment on on the website, StopDoingNothing.com. I wouldn't also mind hearing your comments over on YouTube at youtube.com/Patrick Allman, where this video will be posted. And, connect with me on Twitter also, at Patrick Allman, and any place you can find me. I'm Patrick Allman all over the place. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the episode this week, episode 12 of the Stop Doing Nothing podcast, the podcast for high achievers. Be sure you subscribe on the website. Tune in next week when I'm going to cover another topic about happiness, about wealth, about personal growth. These are all the kind of topics that we talk about at Stop Doing Nothing. And when you go to Stop Doing Nothing, you'll see all of our topics right there at the page at StopDoingNothing.com. Until next podcast and until next video, you take care and thanks for listening.